Mama Trauma here. This is an open letter to ACOG on their recent abortion legislation statement. I was intrigued today to discover, albeit a couple of days late, that ACOG, which if you're not aware is the American Congress of Obstetricians and Gynecologists, they released a public statement regarding the abortion issues happening in Texas right now. They also have another statement about a month old denouncing legislation efforts regarding patient care, basically, which included certified midwives, which was interesting, not entirely surprising. I'll be honest up front, this video is not about abortion. I don't touch that debate publicly with a 10-foot pole. Maybe one day, but today is not the day. I'm sure you can understand that. So back to the statement. I actually thought the statement was quite great from a professional standpoint. Before you jump all up in arms, we need to remember that ACOG is more of a labor union type organization, so they were appropriately trying to stick out their necks for their providers in their own professional group who might be in the practice of providing abortions as a part of their well-woman care programs. I get that. What I found really interesting was that in this statement they use some key phrases that those of us in the natural childbirth and human rights and childbirth communities commonly use when speaking out against some of ACOG's policies and providers. I found the statement to be very contradictory to their usual stances on issues. It was very double standard-ish. Like, these statements are okay to use when it protects our physicians, but not when we're talking about our patients, our moms, our children. Of course, the first thing that stuck out to me was the title. ACOG, your title to this was an open letter to Texas legislators, get out of our exam rooms. And it stuck out to me mainly because, well, that's similar to what I usually say when I refer to my own birth story for our second child. You know, I specifically told the doctor to get his fingers out of my vagina, and he didn't, which is why I'm in this line of work. So they say, get out of our exam rooms, legislators. And can I get it? These are your providers that might be losing a chunk of business if the Texas law passes. ACOG wants legislators out of the exam room so their providers can continue doing their thing. It's their job to advocate for their providers. But I want to ask ACOG, when and where do we draw this line? Our medical care is so removed from the legal realm that there's next to no possibility of recourse against negligent actions beyond filing formal complaints through local medical boards. And thank God for those boards handling these tough situations. But what about when a fine or even license suspension or removal just isn't enough? What about those times when the providers under your union act in such a negligent or abusive manner that police, lawyers, and legislators truly are warranted? Unfortunately, many of those situations right now remain unresolved because no one wants to even fathom dragging a doctor into a courtroom, especially over a childbirth situation. Didn't you know they're untouchable? On the same token, while you don't want legislators in your exam rooms, many of us don't want legislators or doctors in our homes, or frankly, doctors in our vaginas, or anything else for that matter, unless we specifically consent to that. And believe it or not, showing up in an office or hospital does not automatically give the consent needed. And we can revoke that consent at any given point, regardless of where we are, who we're with. Many moms refuse to birth in a hospital for many reasons. More often than not, the very way your own physicians handle their patients and their care is to blame. And moms want to avoid those situations. Those moms have the right to birth at home with qualified providers if they desire. And we've been under, as you called it, relentless legislative assault on the patient-physician relationship for quite some time now too, just as you feel you and your providers have been. But I know that home birth would jeopardize some of your business, of the business of your physicians, so I understand that ACOG, you had to send lobbyists on your behalf to California recently against the idea of home births, despite scientific evidence stating that planned home births are as safe, if not safer, than planned hospital births. And even despite your own recent public statement against legislative interference, which included certified midwives, therefore inferring that ACOG is working towards a better maternity care system to include home births, which coincides with a lot of the statements I heard at this year's ACOG conference in New Orleans. It's just interesting that you would continue to lobby against home births after all that. But I understand your position because your first and foremost concern is for your physicians rather than the women and families that they serve, even though in this most recent statement against the Texas legislation, you state, we must draw a hard line against insidious legislation that threatens women's health. Wouldn't you say denying a woman her choice in care providers through legal efforts is actually insidious legislation that threatens women's health? Interesting. It's also unconstitutional, but we'll go there on a later date. You also state that women must have access to all needed health care, from mammograms to prenatal visits to reproductive care, based on scientific facts, not political ideology. You specifically state based on scientific facts, not political ideologies. I totally agree with this one. This one is great, but I think I'm confused. ACOG, do you only speak out when your providers are affected? Your organization says ACOG advocates for the quality care for women. But do you advocate for that care when women are affected, or just when your providers are affected? Again, I get it. You're a labor-type group. You need to advocate for your providers, and this whole Texas abortion situation or anti-abortion situation is totally going to affect your providers and your organization. I get that. I'm just trying to set the record straight because you tout quality care for the women your doctors serve, and now apparently scientific evidence too, which is great. Yet the very idea of things such as actively managing a childbirth, those ideas aren't evidence-based at all. And it's certainly not quality care. In fact, it can cause a whole slew of extra problems for the mom and the baby they would not have encountered otherwise, among a list of other poor protocols lacking scientific evidence. We'll not even get into the use of Cytotec, the stomach ulcer drug, that isn't authorized by any organization for use in labor, that many of your providers continue to use, and have even killed mothers in even the recent past. But we'll not talk about Cytotec. Which brings me to my next point, scientific evidence in quality care. It's a proven fact that the majority of our maternity care within the medical model which your providers offer actually is not conceived from scientific evidence. It's convenience, overloaded doctors' opinions, the need to retain as much business as possible. These are all the reasons for the unsound protocols currently in place in our maternity system, yet you state in your public statement, facts are important, especially when discussing the health of women and the American public. Really? Do you really believe that, or is that just to make you guys look good in this statement? You also say the sanctity of the patient-physician relationship is central to good medicine, a critical tenet embraced by ACOG and other medical societies. But, okay, so does this mean the 5 to 10 minute heartbeat sessions we get with our obstetricians for prenatals is growing a relationship? Because I think I missed the growing part of that. If we could have better access to the midwifery model of care across the country and across the world, we would be able to achieve that relationship in our low-risk moms, which is a critical tenet of care for our midwives also. And our high-risk moms would have a better chance of achieving those relationships with their doctors, as they wouldn't be so overloaded. They'd have time to spend with their patients. It wouldn't just be 5 to 10 minutes. Frankly, I know you know this from what I've heard from your recent conference and seen from your statements. And ACOG words are great, and it's great that you're starting to support midwives, and it's great that you've got these fabulous quotes, touting quality care for moms, but we need actions. You need to tighten up your ship and get some things straight with your providers and your lobbyists, because you're not acting the words that you're saying. ACOG, as always, I'm dismayed by this recent public statement, not because it wasn't good, not because I didn't agree with what you had to say, but because it's totally contradictory to how you as an organization and how your physicians have been behaving as of late. Would you please get it together?